Question. I know some people who use spiritual teachings and self-development teachings to reinforce their consciousness, which created their psychological and physical problems. Therefore, their psychological and physical problems are worse than before they started using spiritual teachings. When we hit the lowest point, we are ready to shift our consciousness. That's a quote. I assume it's a quote from one of my videos. Therefore, we can use the spiritual teachings to hit the lowest point, the person is saying. However, this is plan B. We reap what we sow. Ideally, plan A is that we join the river of life. How can people get out of plan B and join the river of life? So, it's actually a very important observation that the person has made here, because I've seen the same thing. There is a small percentage of people who find spiritual teachings who they are actively using a spiritual teaching to reinforce a certain consciousness, a certain belief, a certain attitude, a certain view of themselves. And, you know, I mean, a typical example is that people have what psychologists call control issues. And you see some people who have these control issues, they are trying to control other people and manipulate them and basically bully them. And so they find a spiritual movement. And now they immediately seek to get some kind of position of authority in that movement. If it's a bigger movement that has these positions, maybe people working for the movement, maybe people arranging things. And so they seek out this position of authority, and they use the spiritual teaching and the authority of the guru to control other people. Now, as I said before, if you have control issues, you are actually not trying to control other people. You are trying to control your own state of mind by controlling other people. And so if you are in a spiritual teaching, it's a total irony to fall into this pattern. Because what is the real purpose of a spiritual teaching? It is not to control your state of mind by controlling other people. It is to use the spiritual teaching to look at your state of mind, overcome the internal mechanism that causes you to be in a disturbed state of mind. In other words, you know, why would you want to control something? It's because you are in a very vulnerable state of mind. You are in a dysfunctional, disturbed state of mind. You are sort of always on the edge of being in a negative state of mind or being disturbed. So you feel that you have to control your environment because then you can avoid going into this, whether it's anger or fear or whatever it is. So you're trying to control your environment so nobody's pushing your buttons. Here you find a spiritual movement. And if it's a genuine spiritual movement, it has teachings and tools for how you can overcome that dysfunctional psychology. So you don't have the control issue anymore because you don't have that psychology that can cause you to go into this unpleasant reaction. But instead of seeing this and admitting this, you are now seeking out a position of authority in the spiritual movement, and you're using the spiritual teaching, you are borrowing the authority of the guru to try to control other people so you don't have to look at your own state of mind. The irony is that these people have completely failed to understand what the spiritual path is about. Because as I say over and over and over again, spiritual growth requires you to look at your psychology, look at the patterns you have, because spiritual growth is about attaining a higher state of consciousness. You are right now below that state of consciousness. Why? Because you have some mechanism in your psychology that keeps you tied at that level. So the only way to get to the higher state of consciousness is to look at those mechanisms and overcome them. But when people have this state of authority, they are saying, but I'm not bossy, I'm not controlling, I'm just doing this to make things work. And this is what the guru wants. I am just seeking to help the guru get this organization work, and I'm actually trying to help these other people by controlling them so they don't act out their egos or whatever it is. There are millions of excuses, and I've seen quite a few of them. Because in both all the spiritual movements I've been involved with, there were people who fit this pattern. They sought out a position of authority and then they used it to reinforce their state of mind. And what happens when people do this? Well, it depends. Because if it's not a genuine spiritual movement, let's say it's a false guru who's trying to steal people's energy, then he has an advantage of having such people in a position of power. But let's say it's a genuine movement, especially an ascended master movement. What happens is that these people, when they are really using a genuine spiritual teaching to control others, they're getting a more powerful return from the cosmic mirror. They're projecting out an impulse, they're getting a more powerful return, which means usually their condition becomes more extreme until something breaks. Either they see it, or either other people in the movement complain, or the guru hears about it and the person is removed from their position. I've seen this happen in spiritual movements. So the thing is, I understand that the person is asking the question, but I can't pull a rabbit out of the hat and say this is how to solve the problem. Because, there's two ways to solve the problem. Is that other people can become aware that here's a person who's abusing power, but in many spiritual movements there isn't that feedback mechanism where you can really complain about it. So you can get out of the way. You can either leave the movement or try to stay away from the person who's doing this. But the thing is, the ultimate solution is, of course, that the person comes to see it and that they receive help to overcome the pattern and then be free of it. Because what you see in all of these people is that even though they may think that they are sophisticated and they have authority and they are doing the right thing, they are constantly in tension. And this is usually what causes, the breakdown, is that they become more and more tense. And so they have to act out in more and more extreme ways until they can't do it anymore. But the problem is that these people, until they have the breakdown, they're in complete denial that there is a problem. And if you try to tell them, but you are using the spiritual teaching, you are using the authority of the guru just to act out your control issues, they would be in complete denial about it. And they will find all kinds of ways to say that you're the problem, and you're rebellious, you are attacking them, you are not doing what you're supposed to do, you don't want to obey, you don't want to support the movement, you don't want to support the guru. If you're rebelling against them, you're rebelling against the guru because they have their authority from the guru. All kinds of nonsensical something of nonsense that people can come up with to defend their control issues. And this is, I've talked about there are two ways to learn in schoolroom earth. One is through the inner direction, where you look at yourself, and the other is through the school of hard knocks. And these people may be in the spiritual movement, but they're still in the school of hard knocks. And so really it's a matter of how hard do the knocks have to become before these people break down, they can't handle it anymore, and they come to that point where they're willing to consider this very, very, for the ego, very dangerous question. Is it possible I need to look at myself? And, how can you get people to that point until they're ready? And so what can you do about it yourself? Well, you can do what I always return to is you can look at yourself. Am I reacting to these people? Do I have a reaction to it? And then you look at that reaction. You realize it comes from a separate self. You use it to chase down that separate self until you've exposed it, gotten over it. And then you can say, well, I don't need to react to that person anymore, so it doesn't really matter what the person is doing. Or you can say, I don't want to be exposed to this anymore. I'm just removing myself from the situation. But either way, you have grown because you have achieved resolution. Whether the other person grows or not, It's not really your responsibility, because you are responsible for your path, not for the other person. I know there's a difficulty there because these people often can hurt a lot of people, and when they abuse their power. And so I'm not saying you shouldn't speak out against it if there's a possibility of doing so. But nevertheless, you have to get to that point, as I've said before, with difficult people, where you're not doing it from your subconscious selves. It's not your unresolved psychology that causes you to speak out against these people's unresolved psychology. You have to resolve your own psychology first before you can speak out. And then maybe you can speak out, or maybe you can't. So did I cover everything here? Yeah, so basically you can say, as I said, the irony is that these people are in the spiritual movement, but they are using the spiritual teaching as a justification for not raising their level of consciousness, for staying at a certain level of consciousness, staying in a certain dysfunctional, unresolved psychology. And it's, of course, a great irony. The problem is, in my experience, these people, I can't see it until they reach this turning point or breakdown point where they are willing to look at themselves. They are usually, this is what they're doing. They are projecting out. I need to control everything out there. And I need to do this for the guru or for whatever, or for other people's sake. So they're always projecting out. And as long as you are projecting out, you cannot look at yourself at the same time. It's impossible. Our attention goes out or goes in. It can't do both at the same time.